Last fortnight, I made a batch of homemade cold process soap that threw me for a loop. I attempted to make a unicorn soap with gorgeous pastel colors, but no matter how much titanium dioxide I added, well...
Look at my white batter. It's literally more yellow than my yellow batter.
Since then, I embarked on a mission to create a pure white soap that doesn't contain any white colorant. I'm looking at you, TD. As a little bonus for you all, I wanted to use ingredients that you could find at your local store. So join me, your bubble buddy Chris, as I unveil the secret to making pure white soap. If you make soap, you're probably thinking,
Chris, you're so dumb, just make a coconut oil soap.
And while both of those statements are valid, I have more of a problem with coconut oil soap than I do with being dumb. Soap that is 100% coconut oil tends to be drying and harsh on the skin. Everyone's skin is different, and that may not apply to you, but I'll let my fingers speak for themselves. Another problem with coconut soaps is they tend to saponify very quickly, thus destroying any dreams you have of pulling off fancy swirly designs. While there is a time and place for a 100% coconut oil soap, that time is nope, and that place is nuh-uh for me at this moment. That's why I'm going to make a 35% coconut oil soap instead. And I want it to satisfy 4 requirements. 1. It has to be white. The white that toothpaste commercials say your teeth should be and blame you for not having. 2. It has to be workable. I want the batter loose enough to do swirly designs with, and I want it to be that consistency for a while. 3. It has to be a balanced bar of soap. It should lather well, it shouldn't be very drying, not too hard, not too soft. 4. It has to be affordable. No luxury butters or oils, only stuff you could find at a store. Just keep in mind that everything I'm doing is based on theory and minimal experimentation, which is the recipe for success that all the great scientists like Einstein and Tesla followed, right? In other words, you're gonna find out if this recipe is a success at the same time I do, so let's get to it. The whitest soap I could think of is coconut soap, which is why I'm going to try to create a coconut recipe that meets all of our demands. The first step is finding another fat that's as close to white as possible and that's relatively cheap. At first, I bought fractionated coconut oil from the store, which is a form of coconut oil that's had its lauric acid removed, so it's liquid at room temperature. But then I realized that fractionated coconut oil contains a high ratio of caprylic and capric acid. They're very harsh on your skin when used in soap. So because I conducted this research after I bought the bottle of fractionated coconut oil, I have to figure out a way to get rid of it, so bother leaving ideas in the comments below. Another trip to the grocery store, I guess, and for our quest to find a different type of fat, I uncovered a few options. Vegetable shortening, lard, and tallow. The latter two are essentially the same thing, just different animal, and vegetable shortening like Crisco is essentially just hydrogenated palm oil and soybean oil. The problem with shortening is it has a tendency to go rancid much faster than, say, coconut oil. Dreaded orange spots would ruin my beautiful white, so it looks like I'm left with lard and tallow. The brand Tenderflake sells pure lard at my local store, so I'll go with that. Lard is a great choice because it's high in unsaturated fat, which will help slow down saponification and make the bar more gentle, and it's snow white in color, so we're kind of hitting 2 birds with 1 stone here. Keep in mind, because we've chosen lard, this is not a vegan friendly option. However, you can choose to use vegetable shortening, just make sure to find one that doesn't contain soybean oil since that oxidizes and rancidifies very quickly. Your bars will also have the slightest pale yellow color, but it will still be quite white. So we have lard and coconut, now we've just got to find a way to balance them to make a lovely bar of soap. I experimented with the 2 fats on SoapCalc and found that a good ratio seemed to be 65% lard to 35% coconut oil. The fatty acids seem pretty balanced. The saturated to unsaturated ratio should give us a pretty fluid batter, so I'm pretty confident about this recipe. Let's put it to the test. I usually do a quarter batch when experimenting, so that'll be 267 grams of velvety lard that I'll scoop onto my scale, and then 144 grams of soupy half-melted oil of the coconut variety will be drizzled on top as if this were a sundae of delicious fat. I've listed the full recipe down in the description below, or if you're watching this in the year of 2058, that probably doesn't exist anymore, so I apologize, person from the future. I melt those 2 fats down to 49 degrees Celsius, which is a tad on the warm side, but that's okay because my favorite favorite part about soap making is standing around waiting for things to happen. Something that concerns me slightly is the color my fats took on is undeniably urine forward.
Especially with those little bubbles there.
And I'm hoping that'll clear up once the soap saponifies. Once my fats are down to temp, I pour in my skin-eaty liquid, and while doing so, I hear a very definite chunk sound, which made me think that some of the lye caked together and didn't dissolve completely. I hunted for it and nary was it found, so I just hope that one of my bars doesn't have a pleasant lye surprise hiding inside waiting to dissolve my skin. If you happen to see me using a little strainer for my lye water in the future, this is the origin story. Since I'm not completely sure if there's undissolved lye in there, I'm not giving these bars to anyone but myself. I blend them up for a few seconds just to see how the batter fares. With batches this small, my soap comes to trace in just seconds, and if I'm not careful, it can thicken up quickly. Because lard is a slow-moving fat in soap, my batter is a beautiful creme anglaise. This is the perfect consistency for fancy swirls, but how long will it last? 10 minutes later, the batter has barely moved. It's a tiny bit thicker, but still very workable. 30 minutes later, it's nice and syrupy and still has a while to go before it's unworkable. At this point, my normal Katie Carson batter would be the consistency of buttercream, so I think it's safe to say I can check off requirement number 2. Just keep in mind, this batter doesn't contain any fragrance. If it did, it'd probably be moving along much quicker. I pour that saucy goodness into my quarter batch mold, give it a nice shower of rubbing alcohol, and then say goodnight to it so it can sleep and saponify. So, problem. I checked on the soap an hour later to see that it was in the process of gelling. I soaped a little warmer, 40 degrees Celsius or so, and I kept it in the warm closet, so I may as well have been trying to get it to gel. I moved it out of the closet to a place that was cooler, hoping I could arrest the gelling before it spread to the rest of the soap. All I could do was cross my fingers and hope for the worst because I always get the opposite of what I hope for. My soap was ready to cut 3.5 hours after I poured it, which meant I wasn't about to haul out all of my camera equipment at 11:30 p.m. to document that momentous event. But here's the bar 24 hours later, and it's pretty darn hard. One benefit of this recipe is you can really increase your throughput since you don't have to wait as long between batches. Realistically, you can make the soap one morning and use it the next. I would still recommend a proper 4-week cure for it though. Of all of my soaps to accidentally gel, this is the worst one for it to happen to. White soaps that have gelled take on a slightly translucent appearance and tend to appear darker and less white. If I hold the soap up to my lights, you can really see the effect this has on the color of the bar. And putting it on top of a piece of paper, you can see it's a little on the warm side. I could go whiter by using a higher ratio of coconut oil, but just remember that might make the bar more intense on your skin. This soap is not the pearly white that 9 out of 10 dentists recommend you bleach your teeth to, perfectly acceptable to me, and white enough to barely interfere with the colors I'd use with it. Requirement number 1, met. I have a basin filled with warm water that I'm going to test this bar in. It's a week old at this point, so it's not ideal for testing, but I've got to get a video out somehow. This bar actually lathers very similarly to my standard soap base. You get these big bubbles that fracture and become smaller and smaller to create a nice creamy lather. It's definitely on the bubbly side thanks to that coconut, but the lard is really helping tone it down. My hands are always slightly dry after I wash them, and this time they weren't any drier than usual. You know, it actually was really gentle, wasn't harsh or stripping at all, which means requirement 3 has been met. That leaves one last requirement, the price. How much did this bar of soap cost compared to my standard soap recipe? Well, I got this lard from the store on sale for $4.77, and I used 267 grams, so that's $2.80 worth of lard for this recipe. I used my standard coconut oil that I sourced from my soap and candle supplier Voyageur, but assuming I bought 392 grams coconut oil from Walmart for $5.97, that's $2.20 for the batch. The recipe uses 61 grams of lye, which you can get from Home Depot for $5.98 per pound, which comes down to 80 cents for the batch. Total, the batch costs $5.80 and material costs or $1.45 Canadian per bar. Plugging in the numbers for my normal batch of soap, I get $7.98 per batch or $1.99 per bar. That means by going pure white, I'm almost saving 30% compared to using my normal soap recipe. You know what that means? So there we have it, a brand new soap recipe that I can use to make the colors of my dreams, whether pastel or vibrant. Even though the soap gelled, that didn't really take away too much from the bar. It's still nice and white and ready for color. And guess what? No titanium dioxide. I named this soap Zero because, like Jack Skellington's faithful companion, there's barely anything there. No colorants, minimal fats, and does the job the way soap should. That was a soap journey with Soap Universe. Thank you for watching. Bubble bye.